Welcome to Executive Education in Sustainable Fashion. Today we're going to talk to Julie Gilhart about the amazing work she's done leading sustainability with people like Barney's and LVMH and now with The Real Real. Welcome to the next installment of Executive Education in Sustainable Fashion. My guest this week is actually a very good and very dear friend of mine, Julie Gilhart. Julie, welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Thank you. So, Julie, we first met when you were the fashion director of Barney's.
Yes.
Everyone knows Barney's, global leader in high-end fashion and much else besides. Tell me a little bit about that and what you've done since moving out of Barney's.
So, at Barney's, I was there for 18 years. And so I never expected, I only thought I was going to be there for a year. And I made that very clear when I first started working there. And then I was wrong. I ended up staying for 18 years.
You were exposed to so many brands, the evolution of fashion.
Yeah, it was.
You discovered so many brands for the US.
Yes, it was before social media. And we had to really dig to find talent. And it was also before retailers got to be obsessed about square footage and profits per square foot. So we were just focused on finding talent. And we figured that if we found talent, that would create great business. And that was really the DNA of the store and what the Pressmans set up when they founded it.
I think that's so instructive for what we're talking about now with sustainability, because time and again, what's becoming increasingly clear is that sustainability in a company will only happen if there's a vision for it.
Yes.
Culture has strategy for breakfast, as was famously said,
Yes.
but that's how Barney's became the company that it is.
Yes, I mean, we read energy. We didn't read other people's thoughts on if something were good or not. We went inside, which I think is what we all need to do today, and really to find out where our passions were.
And I think that's also instructive for sustainability, because reading the desires of the consumer is what's driving a lot of people to embrace sustainability.
Yes.
It's what the customer wants.
Yes, and now with social media, we can really easily measure that. It's not just we think, there's actually really analytics that can measure that.
So you left Barney's and you became a consultant.
Yes.
So tell me some of the companies you've consulted with.
Well, my first project was with Amazon, and that actually was a 3-year consulting project. And it actually started I was a little nervous to go into Amazon, especially since my culture was Barney's. And that was about 8 years ago. And they were polar opposites. And that was before Amazon even had fashion. So they were mostly, it was apparel. It wasn't fashion. So, but I'll never forget, we had this interesting conversation about, I said, well, if on the site you wanted to, give a percentage of everything that was sold that day that was blue, you could give it to an ocean charity. And they said, yes, that we would definitely consider that. And that was really why I went into Amazon, because I thought, oh my gosh, they have 300 million customers.
You can make
really
a huge change.
Make a change. But
yeah.
In Amazon talk, I didn't realize that was actually, they will listen to anything, but they're very particular in what they actually
right.
Actually act on. And I'm grateful for that experience, because it taught me a lot about that sort of platform and technology.
We were just talking about JD in another conversation, mm-hmm. and I was hearing about JD's recycling. Mm-hmm. They're a massive delivery company, 100,000 vehicles or something, mm-hmm. and every one of those vehicles delivers, but it also collects, mm-hmm. and it also recycles. Mm-hmm. So I think that as much as Amazon is criticized for many things, they have the capacity to do incredible things given their scale. So anyway, yes. I don't want to get stuck on Amazon. Yes. You also are very closely associated with LVMH through the LVMH
that
Prize.
Amazon was really like a 3-year full-time project. And I helped start Amazon Fashion. And then from there, Delphine Arnault called me and said that LVMH was starting a prize for emerging talent, and would I help? And so that actually was 6 years ago, and that's been a great project, because LVMH, they make a very easy application, and it's globally. This year we had about 1,700 applicants that we narrowed down to 20, and then it's narrowed down to 8. And
it's a very international prize as well. That's something I enjoy about it.
yeah, it's completely global, and it's there's very little criteria other than you have to have 2 collections and be under 40.
So one of the things we were just talking about before we went on air was the sustainable nature of the people that are finalists now.
Yes, I was super excited about that because I'm very close to the applicants, and this year, in the short list, which is the initial 20, I would say it was an incredible sea change because I think that the talent were based on design, but yet when you start to talk to them and look at how they get to that design, they're thinking about, recycling, upcycling materials, using low impact processes, their supply chain. They have a whole sustainability sort of thought process that's coming to them naturally, and they're excited about it. So not only are they good designers, they're excited about that, and it's part of their story. Like, what you see is not what you get. Like, before in fashion, you said, this is fabulous. Now they're saying, this is what I do, but it's also, and they give you this whole story. So it's
because it's
really
hardwired into them.
Yes, and it's authentic, and they're proud of it, and they're at the same level of just designers and young talent before them that weren't really thinking about it.
I was just talking to somebody about a trade show, a fabric trade show, and they were saying, oh, it's Premier Vision. They said, yeah, Premier Vision has a section of sustainability, and I said, that's a problem. Why is there a section of sustainability? And I think what you're talking about is the future of design, where there's no sustainability section. Everyone's into it.
Yes.
It's part of who they are.
Yes, and that's when I was at Barney's, we did a lot of initiatives. We looked for high design but high sustainability, and there was always a debate whether we would have a section, but we're always about it has to just integrate into everything, and we made that happen.
Well, I think it was I remember those days shopping for designer clothes 10, 15, 20 years ago, and the last thing on your mind was buying it and discarding it. You wanted to preserve it. You wanted, for women that have beautiful handbags from 20 years ago, of course you're still holding on to that because it was built to last.
Yes.
I mean, that brings us quite neatly to a company you're involved with now, which is The Real Real.
Yes.
So tell us a bit about that.
Yes. Oh my gosh, I love that company so much. First of all, it's founded by a woman, and a woman in technology that is a CEO and founder and is tracking to be $1 billion company is very rare.
And so it's new, founded by a woman, technology, about to be $1 billion.
Yeah.
Those are pretty important criteria.
Yeah, especially in the tech world. It's a very male-dominated area, and it's changing the way women shop. So not only, say for instance, I was going to buy a leather jacket, and it's say $1,000. My thought process is much different. I would used to think, $1,000, I don't know, I'll keep it forever. But now you say, it's $1,000, I love it. And after a year, if I don't like it anymore, I can actually resell it and have somebody else like it, and I get some money for it, and I can buy whatever I want. And that's the heart of consumerism.
I think that's the heart of future consumerism.
Yeah,
it used to be the past, and we did it and we were fine. But you're right. Now people are thinking forwards in that sense.
Yes, it's the sharing economy, it's the rental economy, it's the resale economy. And one thing that I have to say about The Real Real, they've spent a lot of time developing the sustainability calculator, and it can actually measure the impact of buying resale versus buying new, and they translate it into an equation of you've saved 100 trees by your purchase. And I mean, the numbers that they've done as a company are just really incredible. It's millions of millions of trees. It's millions of water saved, liters of water. So it's fascinating.
So I think a lot of people watching this are going to be in China, and there's not a second-hand clothing culture in China. It's very, very alien to the way that people have been raised. But of course, it's the cutting edge here. We're quite used to thrift stores, etc. But for high-end consumers to think, I'm going to buy something for me that's new, even though it's pre-loved or whatever the word is, how can we go about convincing people that it's a good thing? And by the way, I think $1 billion business makes it sound like a very good thing.
Well, I think if you go back to the LVMH prize and this new generation that's really talking a lot about it, that becomes cool. that's energy. And the high and low always speak to each other. So I think we're headed into a place where you can say, oh, this is rented. Before you say, oh, I got this at, Dover Street Market.
Yeah.
Or you can say, my diamond, oh, that's made in a laboratory. It becomes, we're going into that area or that future of where this is going to be the new status. A Tesla, versus another, I'm not a car person, but, one that's a diesel that uses up a lot of gas and energy,
And I think that's one of the
Obviously, I'm not a car person. I can't even talk about it.
I think that's one of the things.
I don't use a car. I use Uber. I use, or Lyft or Juno or whatever. I don't need a car. And if I do need a car for long term, I'm renting it. I don't want a car. And I come from Texas where you drive. I don't want a car.
I love this. And I think that when you look, I'm inspired for the future, and I think China for me is a very fertile place where a lot of change can happen. And I look at Didi, for example, which is the Chinese version of Uber. For my money, much, much better service. I mean, Uber's great, but I don't like being gouged. Didi has multiple other elements which to me make it much better. Yes. So if I think about, all right, so what's the Chinese real? When you've been.
I think they have. I'm not so versed on it, but I think they do have that sort of Chinese, and I think the numbers, I forget what it's called, but I think it's growing. But I have to say something, I actually love China, and I was introduced through Dee Poon and her mother, Marjorie Poon, who have a scale, who do a seed to shirt business. They're a very large shirt manufacturer. They use organic cotton, and they have a whole company philosophy.
Actually, this is Deep
Is it Pi?
Yeah, this is a Pi.
That's great. So from that, I've met so many great people in China. So my hopes for China, in terms of clean technology, more responsible fashion, is very high. I think if you look at China as an industry, it's sort of like if you look at H&M for an example. A billion-dollar company, a multi-billion-dollar company, they've been around for a while. It's hard to change, but the acceleration of their growth of change is actually pretty good.
Yeah.
So I'm super supportive.
So who else can we think of that's inspiring in this field?
Well, I mean, the icons are Patagonia and Eileen Fisher.
Right.
And you study those companies, and they're not fashion per se companies, but their principles can easily be applied to any kind of industry. And I think that their currency is very valid, and I think that they're great. I think there's some great technology-based companies. I mean,
embracing technology and using it to further your sustainable goals.
Yes, that and fashion, I think, are perfect. You mentioned the Real. I was just in San Francisco. I love Allbirds. That's an amazing company where they just take a simple design for a shoe. They make it really sustainable, and it's not fashionable, but all of a sudden it becomes kind of cool. And they're not very old. They're just a few years old, and they were just valued at over $1 billion. So, for someone who's in business, you gotta watch that.
Yeah.
But someone who's a consumer and loves fashion, I like it too, because it's got great style, for certain purposes, and also, I love the story behind it, and that's a great company. Everlane, I've been watching for a long time, and they've just recently made a goal of taking all virgin plastic out of everything by 2021, and they've started their own sort of a sustainable apparel part of their company, and they're tracking to change it. So I think they're great.
I think you mentioned these companies, and all I can think is that anyone who's not paying attention to sustainability is going to be in trouble.
Yes.
You don't have the option. We're not saying, oh, you should embrace sustainability. The fact is, it's going to be cool, because it is for the forward-thinking people now. It's already proven to be profitable.
Yes.
And we were just talking about Larry Fink.
Yes.
If you're not involved in it, the big shots in finance are going to cut you out anyway.
Yes, that was kind of amazing that he made. He's a $1 trillion investor.
He has $3 trillion. This is BlackRock, which we actually talked about in another conversation.
Yes.
$3 trillion.
Yes, and he's saying that if you're not investing in companies that are watching their environmental impact, they're not worth investing in. So, that's really interesting. So I think we are at a change, and I think that if you're wanting to have a long-term business, you have to have you have to have a platform that is encouraging, a better future.
Well, I think you've got to be seen to stand for something. Because the days of I don't really talk about that, that's long gone.
It's difficult, though, I will say, because if you're a large company, say, for instance, you're Amazon, if you're the Gap, it's really hard, particularly if you're a public company. I think public companies sometimes are the worst because they prevent you from taking a particular stand because it's not a majority. And so, that's why... I think that we've been slow to see big change on a big level.
Well, yeah, I mean, I look at the excuses a lot of companies offer, and they're legitimate. Some of them, they are. Just because you want to do it doesn't mean the company will let you do it, and corporate regulations prevent you from doing some things.
Yeah.
But to me, the problem is not necessarily only with the corporation; it's with the consumer.
Yes.
And the consumers are changing.
Yes.
Consumers follow KOLs and influencers and certain brands and rock stars, etc.
Yeah.
And if they are embracing sustainability, the consumer's going to look at their phone, they're going to go, am I going to go in your store or am I going to go in that store? And Pharrell shops in that store because he believes in sustainability, so I'm just going to go there.
Yeah.
And if you don't have a position on that, then you're out.
Mm-hmm. I think if you want to do long-term business, you have to do that. You can't, everything else is just short-term.
Yeah.
So I think that if you're starting something, you have to have a platform of environmental impact.
It does seem incredibly short-sighted when people don't have that.
Yes.
And they certainly people that are in a domestic market and they've been successful in that domestic market and they think, well, I'm good. I don't have to worry.
Yeah.
But nothing's domestic anymore. Mm-mm. And that's one of the critical things I'm seeing. Wherever you go now in the world, everyone can see what's going on in the world. We all have phones. We can also, we just heard yours, we can all see it.
Yeah, sorry about that. But I do think, too, if you look to see at the different social movements we have, that is actually a trend in itself. So you better be pretty clean on what you're doing because people are looking.
Well, there's not only that, but there's regulations.
Yes.
There are certain countries are lagging behind, certainly like this country we're in, but there are other countries that are very progressive. Mm-hmm. And there are countries where they'll announce legislation and they'll enact that legislation, and suddenly you can't do what you were doing before.
I see China as being very progressive.
Well, I think so too.
Because, fashion is a great mirror. It actually really reflects what's going on. And so, I'm seeing a lot more talent. I'm going to Shanghai to be a judge for the first Business of Fashion China Prize. And that's, that's all about the emerging talent of China. And it's happening. I'm seeing it.
Well, I was lucky enough to be on a television show for many years in China, looking at the talent, and we would choose the best designers and then bring them to the US to study at Parsons.
Yes.
And even 10, 15 years ago, I was seeing the excellence of their best students.
Yes.
I think they're now practicing either around the world or back in China. So the quality of design, I think, has been there for some time. What's now exciting is seeing industry catch up with that.
Yes.
Because they're, the smart people in industry are global. They're seeing what's going on. They're saying, if I want to be successful in Europe and in the US and in my own country, I've got to embrace these global expectations, and those include sustainability.
Yes, and also I think we should also talk about the marketing part of this, because it's actually, there's so much storytelling in it. And I do think there's a big shift where you have to really pay attention to how you can market things. You have to be able to tell a story. Yeah. And that's just the age that we're living in, thanks to social media.
It's funny because I give so many speeches around the world, and tell your story is always one of my big lines. You have to be able to tell the story. And you've got to, going back to a kid standing outside two stores, like, which one should I go in? If you've told an effective story about who you are as a brand and what you stand for, the kid's going to relate to you.
Yes.
If you haven't, then they're going to read into it what their friend tells them, and that might not be what you want them to think.
Well, going back to a company like Everlane, when they're not perfect, but they actually have really good pillars of factory transparency and price transparency, and now they're developing sustainability transparency. But when they launched their denim, which was done by a really beautiful factory in Vietnam, Zytex, and they have like their water savings and their their impact on their measurable impact is really, really good. They had lines outside the store. They sold out.
Yeah.
In just a short amount of time.
People definitely do underestimate the impact that sustainability can have.
Yes.
Not everywhere. There are certain groups of society that don't care. And it's going to be a long slog for them to either care or just to give them something where, they just get it anyway. But plenty of people do care.
Yeah, I think going back to Larry Fink, the business is in the other.
ESG, that's it. That's what Wall Street is all about: environmental, social, and governance.
Yeah.
And you're right, from Larry Fink on down, no one's investing in anything unless you've got a good story around your ESG position.
And if you're in fashion, you have to, and you're creating something new, you have to create it based on those principles.
Yeah, you've got to bake it into you. So I know you work with Outerknown.
Yeah. I'm so proud of that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they're a company. I mean, Kelly is a surfer, just as you're a surfer as well.
Yes.
Not everyone knows that about Julie. A very accomplished surfer.
Well, I don't know about accomplished, but
you can probably stand up on the board. I mean,
I'm constantly trying. But no, that was great. That was a big shift because Kelly comes from those big surf brand where they mass produce and there's no governance on supply chain. And from the get-go, he had to make a really conservative decision to create a brand that was 100% sustainable. And nothing's 100%, but it's pretty 100%.
Yeah.
And it's also now direct to consumer for the most part. So those are two big shifts.
I think actually you touch upon something there that we should highlight, which is, what does sustainability mean? Nothing's sustainable. We should accept that. Nothing really is. But you can be circular. You can do the right thing. You can, because I don't think we're going to shame anyone into doing the right thing. It doesn't work like that.
Well, I think that when I've seen these big companies internally they're making changes, but they have to have the whole full Monty before they actually say, we're doing this. It's like, no, just take a small project and then start from there and work with that and build out. You're never going to have the perfect business equation for sustainability. It will take years. So it's better to just start with a small little corner. That's why I love Lane Crawford. I was just talking to Andrew Keith, who's the president, and they started with recycling their hangers and plastic cover bags, and they recycled in a year, or they recycled in a year, I think, I don't know how many millions of plastic. I don't know the exact measurement. It's a new program, but they're starting with that, and it's great. And they engaged other people. So that's actually what we did at Barney's. We just decided that there was a lot of internal conversation about we can't do this because we're not a sustainable company. And then the CEO at the time said, well, let's just pick one thing, and we did it. So we picked one thing, then we went to the next, and then to the next, to the next, and then it became like a little seed that was growing.
Yeah.
So, and there's no harm in that. Transparency is essential, and the bestest transparent statement you can make is we're far from perfect.
Well, I think H&M are very good at that.
Yep.
H&M, they're very noble. They're trying to do the right thing.
Yeah.
They're definitely not there, but they're the first ones to say, this is us. This is what we're trying to do. Help us.
Yes, and if you look at H&M, they've been called out on a lot of things.
Yeah.
And what's the best thing about being called out is trying to do better.
Yeah.
I know from Burberry, they were called out about burning their clothes. They don't burn anything anymore.
Yeah.
So it was a hard hit, but it actually made them accelerate their program of environmental impact.
Yeah, and I think to grab something from what you were saying as well, start with something. You're probably already doing something.
Yeah.
You don't have to announce we're sustainable now, because you're probably not. But just start with one little thing, like whether it's the hangers and the plastic bags, and if it works for Lane Crawford, you've got to come up with a good excuse as to why it doesn't work for you.
Yeah, and I wouldn't be afraid of greenwashing. So what if somebody calls you out about greenwashing?
Yeah.
If you're doing the one thing that you're going to do, then you have legs to stand on. When I was at Barney's, we would never worry too much about doing something and be criticized for it, because the knowledge that we had, we were doing the right thing.
Yeah.
And if maybe you've made some mistakes, that's okay. Everybody makes mistakes. That's what I love about being in the U.S. We come from that. We can make mistakes. It's okay. We'll just start and do it again. And tech's like that too.
Yeah.
They just go for it, and they go so fast. And if they're making mistakes, they just keep moving. They do not let it, stop them.
Yeah. I think also you make a lot of friends in doing it, and I don't mean that in the delightful but business trivial way, which is friends. I mean, a lot of people are doing this already and they want to help. Yeah. So, there's a lot of people that want to partner with you, and they'll share their knowledge. You look at what Kering does in sharing what they're doing, or Adidas, they're open to sharing what they're doing, which
Yes.
is not actually typical in consumer goods.
No, but it's this open source thing. And that's actually with this new generation, they are more used to working in communities. They do not, it's another generation, they work in groups. So I think that sort of open source idea really appeals to them.
Yeah.
And that's what it's all about, is appealing to the customers that you have now, but also this next generation coming up.
So all the information you need is available. Lots of companies that are already pioneering it are sharing everything already. The KOLs are already doing it. And so, going to a ball in Shanghai or in Chicago and saying, I just got this from The Real Real, or I just got this from Rent the Runway, is cool.
Yeah.
I don't see what's holding people up.
I think it's not. I think there's a lot of first steps. First, you have to ask yourself, why are we doing this? You have to really do a little bit of internal thinking and think what's our goal in this? It's not about let's do something. It's just like, why are we doing this? And get really clear about that. I think that's actually the first step. And then the second step is to get really educated on things. And it's very easy. The resources are out there. The CFDA just has a whole platform that's open source that gives organizations, and there's, for a big company and a small company, these organizations like the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, the SAC, the NRDC, the Clean by Design, they're all very specific, but they have people that will talk to you about different things. Whether you're large or small, you have to be investigative about it.
Yeah.
And going back to what your mission is in this pursuit. It may just be like we don't want to get caught with our pants down, or it's like we want to turn this into a marketing opportunity that will create business. That's okay, whatever it is. Environmental impact is a measurement. So it's not, if it increases your measurement on the environment, then it's a good thing. And I've been in this for so long now, and I'm less judgmental of the whys. I think you just need to act and do something that you feel resonates with you and start there. And it's also really good if you're a company there's a lot of statistics out there about employee attrition. The employees want to be a part of this. They want to go to work for a company that stands for something, or is at least trying to do something.
And that increasingly, I'm at events and people come up to me and they hand me their business card and they represent the sustainability section of a bank, or of an investment company.
Yeah.
So we're not just talking about fashion.
No.
Like we interviewed the head of private wealth for JP Morgan a little while ago, and she said, I would never want to work for a company who I didn't believe in their values.
Yes.
And that was about sustainability.
Yes.
So it's not just about, organic clothes or
Yes.
the rights of workers, or those are very, very critical components of
Yeah.
it. It's also about, if you want to be successful in finance, you've got to embrace sustainability.
Yeah, exactly. And it's good investment. So says Larry Fink.
So says Larry Fink. All right. Well, this is amazing, Julie. Thank you so much for this.
Thanks,
I really
Simon.
appreciate
it's always
it.
a pleasure.
There's so much that people can learn from this. And speaking as someone that's been at the very height of it for a good while now, in spite of your very, very young years, it's a real treat to hear your thoughts on it. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Simon, always.
Thanks for watching. Now join us online and on social media with our experts so we can answer your questions directly and keep this conversation going.